This Hangout on air is live. Week 13. This is it. I mean, lots of it's funny, guys. I was playing my mega mix, like 500 songs. They're all songs that put my mind at ease. I'm answering questions in the football guys message board thread that I do every Sunday morning. An Easy Like Sunday Morning comes on, which is just an incredible song. I mean, it's probably like my go-to karaoke song, at least. And there's so many lines in that song that I could sing with gusto. Look up the lyrics. One of them is, I want to be free to know the things I do are right. I want to be free to know the things that I decide for my fantasy football lineup are right this morning in this penultimate week of the fantasy season, in the sense that we move on to the playoffs. For some, it is the ultimate week of the fantasy season because you go home, you have a toilet bowl to mix things up. So, guys, first, before we jump in, though, I have to ask, how's your Thanksgiving, Gene?
Thanksgiving was pretty good, I have to say. Still a little bit full, a little recovering.
Yeah,
But I
still
think that's
coming out.
part of Thanksgiving. So
Still coming out of the. Yeah, I mean, there is that American. It is the one of the most American holidays, along with Super Bowl Sunday and the 4th of July. So, excess. That's American. How was your American Thanksgiving, Matt Waldman?
It was great. Turkey, turkey, turkey. I think next year we've all decided that we're going to have crab instead next year,
Ooh,
and just
yeah.
and just say goodbye to turkey for a little while. But it's all good.
Crab. So that would be like from the Baltimore roots of your family, right?
Absolutely, blue crab. That's what we'd be doing.
Oh, wow, I know where I'm going to be for Thanksgiving. And you're quite the chef, right, Matt? Like, what give us one of your Thanksgiving specialties.
I can put it down okay. I do. I did turkey and waffles with
Turkey and
with a
waffles.
stuffing waffles. Yeah. So
Turkey and waffles with stuffing waffles.
yeah, that was pretty
I
fun.
don't. I really know where I'm going for Thanksgiving next year. My son might be coming with me because our Thanksgiving was fantastic, except they already heard the story. My 4-year-old son, when relatives started coming over on Thanksgiving night, we were at my wife's dad's house, and he just told them all to leave. He said he didn't want to see them, and then when they wouldn't leave, he said, "I'm going to go upstairs." He's 4, so he
You can
hasn't
hang
learned.
out with him.
Yeah, he would probably love that. He would. He likes kitties much more than dogs at this point. But let's get into, speaking of dogs, let's get into a few of the players' injury situations that we need to monitor. And Gene, of course, we're going to start with Arian Foster. And this was one of those situations where earlier in the week we might have thought this is going to play out like our unfun Arian Foster week. Should we buy into those trade winds blowing us to calmer seas?
calmer seas, yeah, I think it's a good week to use Arian Foster. It's tough. If you go back to week 4, in his first week coming back from the hamstring injury, didn't look good against Buffalo at all. Only managed 6 yards on 8 carries. Didn't look good running the ball at all in the second half, and they basically turned him into a slot receiver, and he ended up getting 50 yards. 55 yards or so. And then the week after that, after looking like he had tweaked his hamstring injury, was great. He had 150, 170 total yards, 2 touchdowns, carried the ball, had 25 some odd touches, something like that. And I think what we're hearing this week, the 3 consecutive limited practices, all the optimism from both Foster and O'Brien suggested that last week was kind of his precaution week, his 6 yards on 8 carries week, and this is the week where he feels like he's close to the normal Arian Foster, and I haven't heard anything to suggest that A, he won't be playing, and B, he's likely to rotate much. Now, yes, it's possible that Alfred Blue could cut into his carries, and we may only see 12 to 15 touches from Foster today. It's possible that he could aggravate his groin injury, as we've seen Monte Ball and Fred Jackson and lots of other guys, including Foster, do over the past weeks to years. This is Arian Foster, by the way. But you're looking at a guy who's telling us that he feels ready to go, who the Texans have leaned on in the past when he says he's ready to go. And I think the risk reward here is that he gets 20 to 25 touches and a couple of touchdowns and more than 100 total yards. And that reward is more than high enough to take the risk on him today, I think. Knowing that it's a tough situation for a running back to come back here. This is one of the few players where I think you can reliably expect him to get close to his usual workload given the practice participation and what he said in the locker room this week. So I think he's okay to use today. I don't know that he's going to fulfill top 3 expectations, but I think there's good reason to suggest that he could be a running back 1 without too much trouble.
And of course, why we even are open to him fulfilling top 3 expectations. It's the matchup. Tennessee cannot stop the run. They faced Arian Foster back in week 8. He had 20 for 151 and 2 touchdowns. Also scored a touchdown as a receiver. They haven't faced fewer than 33 or 31 running back carries over the last 4 weeks. Teams know run, 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 run. And then we get to this, Matt Waldman. What do you think? Chime in on Foster, anything you want to say about Foster, but what do you think of Alfred Blue as a type of what the heck flex? I mean, the teams have seen this. 34 carries last week, 33 from Le'Veon Bell, 31 carries from the Baltimore running backs, 36 carries. And in that last matchup that I just mentioned, Alfred Blue had 15 touches in that game, not only for 64 total yards, but still. What do we think of Foster and Blue today?
That was Blue's first extended look in the NFL, too, so that's very important to note that he's probably going to be a better option this time around than he was last time around. Also, I have Foster in one league, and my option is to start him or Isaiah Crowell right now. And Crowell plays the Bills. I know that the Bills are a little bit tougher defense, but I'm going with Crowell right now. And I think the reason being is that this is a groin injury. It's a little bit different than, maybe a back injury that seems to be manageable. Marshawn Lynch seems to be able to manage it, and I know that I'm just oversimplifying the entire spine and back area, and it's making Gene's hat do this a little bit right now. But I think that the groin injury, the fact that Arian Foster's running style is very much change of direction heavy. I mean, he's not Barry Sanders. Let's not get that crazy, but there's a reason why Daryl Johnson, the fullback from the Cowboys back in the day, compared him to Gale Sayers. And it's because of the way that when he changes direction, the way he times it, and that he often uses a dramatic style of cuts to do that. And that's pretty hard to do on a gimpy groin. Maybe the groin's better, but again, the risk of recurrence, to me, paired with his running style, kind of worries me. And if I had, if my choices are somebody outside of the top 20 and Arian Foster, I'm taking the chance on Foster. But if my choices are somebody within maybe my top 20 backs this week and Foster, I'm leaning towards any of the players in the top 20 that I have. And I know according to your projection, Bloom, Crowell is 20th on your cheat sheet right now. And that was kind of my gut feeling from last week. I was like, who am I going to start even if Arian Foster is going to be starting? And I have Crowell there. And I know that Crowell could easily end up second banana to Terrence West. But just on points of aesthetics, I refuse to believe that's going to happen, especially from what we've seen also during the season thus far. I think that West is a significantly lower tier back than Crowell when Crowell gets his looks. So the way I see it is that it's still a good enough matchup in the way the Browns are playing with Josh Gordon, and the fact that the Buffalo secondary is a little banged up without McKelvin. They're going to have to put a little more extra emphasis on Gordon, which will help the running game. So to me, guys like Crowell, someone like Justin Forsett, maybe Joique Bell. Well, we already saw Joique Bell. I'm sorry. Someone like Eddie Lacy, C.J. Anderson, even Rashad Jennings. Those are all guys that, to me, that are fair game in this case, and I would consider them over Foster just from a safety sake standpoint. Now, if you have to win big, and you have to score a lot of points to get into your playoffs, and you feel like you have to go for that high-end ticket, then Foster might have more upside in that regard. But remember, bad groin, Alfred Blue playing well, bad defense that they're facing, that just means, that he's not going to see his full complement of carries. So if you're looking at it from that standpoint too, Crowell might be your guy. And I am facing the top team in our reality sports league right now, the top scoring team. And while I'm in the playoffs, I want to beat him because he's a good friend of mine. So I'm going to go for the high-end player. So that kind of gives some examples of the dynamic that I would look at.
Yeah, and I think that the thing with Crowell is he's a wide-range guy because he's had some good play in the red zone, even though he is basically splitting the work down the middle. The downside for Crowell is there, though, even though it's easy to forget that. Uh, I don't know what to make out of the Buffalo run defense, honestly, because they've only given up touchdowns to running backs in 2 games this year. Now, one of those games they did give up 3 rushing touchdowns to the Jets, and they've also given up a rushing touchdown to Jamal Charles. But otherwise, they've been a tough defense to run on. I have no idea. And another thing is that we don't know how potent Cleveland's offense really is now, especially in the second week with Gordon back. So that is a tougher call for sure.
It is.
And I mean, generally, I'm saying all systems go with Foster here, mostly because of the matchup, and also I think that Gene laid that out very well, where I think that if we look at the learning from the first time around with Foster, and I also believe that Foster is the one with the say here more than the doctors and more than the team. So I trust him. But as you said, I think you bring up a really good point, Matt, about his running style potentially putting that injury risk. Now we get to Julius Thomas, Gene. And this one is a real, not necessarily a puzzle, but it has been situated for a maximum degree of difficulty in some ways, although we do have some answers for you to make it feel a little bit better. But, without bringing in some of the denominators here of hedges and things like that, let's just talk Julius Thomas, what we know, and the best prediction, even though we're guessing, at what he'll do tonight.
Well, we're definitely guessing. So John Fox said that he looked better on Friday than he did the previous Friday, which doesn't say much at all. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's ready to play, that he can play in his full capacity, that he'll be effective even if he's active. There seems to be still some more pessimism. I don't think that I'd say that he's clearly on the doubtful side of questionable, as we did this time last week, but I think he's every bit questionable. I think he's definitely a game-time decision, and if he feels like he can get out and cut on that ankle well enough to run some routes tonight, then I think he plays. But I think you would have seen Thomas practice more this week if this was more than just a simple low-grade low ankle sprain. So you have to wonder if there's something more going on, and therefore, if he does play tonight, whether or not he can run 30 to 40 routes, whether or not he can be effective. And yes, he can have the same amount of effectiveness as Jimmy Graham or some of these other players we've talked about that have high usage in the red zone. But do you really want to stop and hope that he's going to get 3 to 4 targets, that he's going to be the primary red zone option look tonight, even if he's active? So you don't know if he's going to be active. You don't know if he's going to be effective. You don't know what his usage is going to be. I think there's too many levels of concern here for Thomas to wait on the late game tonight and expect him to be active and then to be effective.
Okay, so laying that out, Gene, let me put it this sharply. How bad of a situation do you have to be in to say that the right answer is just to leave Thomas in your lineup and hope for the best?
Pretty bad. I mean, I would hope that by this point in the season, or at least, you didn't have Thomas last week. So whatever your option was instead of Thomas last week is probably going to be a better option instead of Thomas this week. There hasn't been enough on Friday. John Fox saying he looked better today than he did last week is not enough for me to expect Thomas to play and be effective.
Okay, then we get to Dion Sims and Travis Kelce. Now, Travis Kelce is probably not out there on your waiver wire to pick up as a hedge unless it's a very shallow league.
No, but he may be already on your roster.
Yes. Yes, and if he's already on your roster, well, let's go. Let's just put it this way. This is obviously a massive decision. A lot of teams that are in playoff contention are Julius Thomas teams or teams jockeying for a bye. So this is very relevant. What if Julius Thomas is active? Is Kelce over Thomas the right play even if Thomas is active?
Are you asking me? Yes. Yeah. I'm not putting Julius Thomas in my lineup today, and I will live with the consequences if he's effective and he puts up a Jimmy Graham limited 3-target, 2-touchdown day. I will live with that outcome because there isn't anything that I've seen in the past couple of weeks. There's been optimism. We heard optimism from Cecil last week. We've heard optimism from Julius Thomas, from Adam Schefter, from Ian Rappaport, but we've not seen that in action yet. And until we see Julius Thomas on the field moving in a way that he can take his usual number of routes, he's already a little bit of a high-risk, high-reward option because of the way he's used in that offense. The matchup is such tonight that the Chiefs aren't great against tight ends, and they're without Eric Berry, so it would be a great spot for him. But there's no guarantee that he's going to run even 10 routes. So it's just too much risk for me. If you're asking me Thomas versus Kelsey, there's some of the same issues with Kelsey. Maybe he's only going to get 20 to 25 snaps today. That's not really been the case over the past couple of weeks. There's some risk with Kelsey as well, but you're not, a lot of you dynasty guys out there may have Gronk and Thomas on the same roster, and you don't have to worry about this. But if you're deciding between Thomas and Kelsey, I don't think there's any decision to be made tonight. I think you're planning to use Kelsey, and if Thomas is active, you have to hear something extremely optimistic in pregame warmups to even consider Thomas over Kelsey. I think you're going with somebody else other than Thomas today, unless your decision is Thomas and somebody that you don't expect to get more than a catch or two anyway.
So give everyone out there a refresher. I've been putting my April 2013 from Bleacher Report, the scouting report, and I'm sticking to middle class Dwayne Allen, but Deion Sims is there as a savior. Deion Sims is there as a savior if you're streaming tight ends. Deion Sims is there if you're just tired of the anemic production you've gotten from your tight end. And he is that hedge because he plays on Monday night. And it may not even be a hedge because as Gene lays out, even if you play an active Thomas, there are plenty of risks, and perhaps you should expect very little. Deion Sims is playing a Jets defense that has given up 12 touchdowns to tight ends so far this year. Why should people be taking a long look, Matt, at Deion Sims? With Charles Clay doubtful, Deion Sims could be the guy that pushes you to playoffs?
He could be. He could be the one that helps you win a game if it's close. And the reason being is that he is going to score you points. I mean, it's the type of thing where even when Charles Clay was healthy, the Miami Dolphins were using Deion Sims. They've been trying to push him into the lineup and give him reps because they feel like he's ready to do that. And they've been doing that little by little since even last year as a rookie. Deion Sims is a player that has enough speed to stretch a seam. He's big enough to be able to make plays in tight coverage. He has a good feel for his body in terms of being able to leap and adjust for football, so it makes him a decent red zone threat. And while he's not extraordinarily fast for a tight end, nor is he someone who's going to make the amazing catch for you, he is someone that, like Dwayne Allen, who you brought up, he does all the little things fairly well. And while he's not as talented as Dwayne Allen in that regard, I think that he is almost as talented as Dwayne Allen as a receiver, and that's really what's important. He's not as good as a blocker, but he's almost as good, and that's another reason why they kept him on the field. So when you put all those things together, really Sims is someone that you can expect in a PPR league to probably get you 3 to 5 receptions, probably somewhere between 35 to 65 yards and maybe a touchdown. And if to me, that's a pretty good number for a tight end right now. I just want to go back on one thing with Foster. You guys kind of convinced me about Foster because I'm looking at the Bills' stats for the year, and one of the things that I look at a lot is carry count. And because touchdowns, the Titans have allowed 5 touchdowns, the Bills have allowed 4 touchdowns, so it looks like almost a wash. But the Titans have allowed, I believe, 6 or 7 games with running backs with carries over 20, and then their counterparts have had the number of carries that you see on the Bills list of players that they've allowed. And the Bills have only allowed one player more than 20 carries, and it was Donald Brown for a 31-carry, 62-yard game. So looking at the splits of carries, when I think about opportunities, probably the safer guy to go with is actually Foster, just solely from the standpoint that as long as the groin stays healthy enough, even if they take him out of the game earlier, he stands to have the same number of carries as Crowell. And so from that standpoint, I'd probably rather go with Foster because his upside is maybe he gets 20 carries.
Yeah, and it's funny because, I'm a big Crowell fan, but I haven't found myself recommending Crowell in a lot of questions where it's Crowell and Trey Mason, or even Crowell and Mark Ingram, or Crowell and one of the Cincinnati backs at Tampa. Crowell versus Denard Robinson's tougher. It's just that the floor is low. If he doesn't score a touchdown, the floor is low. And this is a week where we don't really want to be dealing with low floors unless the ceiling is high, and I'm not sure that the ceiling is that high.
He's kind of a knockoff version of Adrian Peterson's carry types.
Mm-hmm.
Like that with Adrian Peterson, he's going to have, if you didn't know what his carries were going to be when he was doing all what he did with the Vikings, you go, well, the way Adrian Peterson, the offense, allow him to carry the football, he might have 15 carries where he gains less than 4 yards, and then he has one that goes for an 80-yard touchdown. The problem is that with Crowell, he's not guaranteed that many carries. If Adrian Peterson had a Terrence West-like figure, platooning with him, then he might very well have that low ceiling. So I would agree with that completely. It's not about talent, it's about opportunity.
Okay, before we march through some more of the injury situations, I want to take an off-ramp here on this running back 2 question, because there's another player that has been mixed into the equation here as a surprise, and egg on our face, Matt, because we kind of downplayed him, and perhaps what he's showing us is just how much value Trent Richardson is taking out of the touches in the Colts backfield. That if you put another running back that just has an for all we know, Boom Herron's burst is just an average NFL burst, but Trent Richardson has been so sluggish and indecisive that any running back you're going to put in there, Maud Bradshaw on his 18th surgery or whatever, they're all going to look good. Now we have Boom Herron in this mix. Matt, where does Boom Herron figure in? If he is going, every report out of Indy is he is going to remain the starter. He is going to remain the more primary back. He did look good with the exception of the fumbles last week. Washington's on a pushover matchup, but now again, I'll refresh your memory on some of the running backs, at least in my projections around him. Guys like Crowell and the Cincy backs and Ingram and Mason. We can throw the New England trio in there. What are your feelings on Herron today?
I would agree with you looking at your projections on just about every player you have listed within 5 spots above him and below him, with the exception of Blunt. And I still think that this New England trio is really more than anything. Put on your tinfoil hat, and I'm kidding when I say this, but for the tinfoil hat wearers out there, Agent Blunt did his job in Pittsburgh, and he was called back to the fold because it sure beats Spygate, since Roger Goodell's not going to be able to confiscate any more video. So because of that, no, seriously, I think Blunt is just someone that he's just a better back than Gray. I think that it was kind of a no contest situation, and Gray wore his he got punished. And the last time I remember a player getting punished like that in New England was Randy Moss and Adelius Thomas for being late in a snowstorm. Not being late because I don't know what the reason is for Gray, but it's one of those things that you can wear out your welcome quick, and that was with a superstar and a very fine starter at outside linebacker. So I'm not sure, now that they got Blunt in there and he knows his system probably better than Gray does, that's a big deal. So I think that with the exception of that, Herron's played decently. We joked about him being boom fizzle or bang snap fizzle. Well, the only thing that I would say is maybe the bang snap fizzle was last week was the bang, this week will be the snap, and the week after that will be the fizzle. So I would ride the snap, at least for right now. He'll give you a little snap to your lineup, but I don't think he's 12 for 65 is nice from an average standpoint, and he did have a decent amount of output with
5
receptions.
5 catches for 30. Well, it's also the Bradshaw role. That's what Bradshaw was doing too.
Yeah, so he's gonna be reliable for you. I can see why he's a reliable running back too at this stage right now. But I don't see his upside being fantastic. At the same time, maybe he gets the rust knocked off last week. This week he's a little better, and then he thinks he's in Columbus. And if he thinks he's in Columbus, he might do pretty darn well.
Indeed. And Cleveland, Houston Texans, Dallas Cowboys up in the last 3 weeks for Indy. Those aren't tough rushing matchups. So I do think Boom Herron, I'm willing to say right now, I was wrong. He's going to be a helpful player for fantasy teams and in deeper leagues, especially if you've been scratching for a running back 2 or you're looking for a flex play.
He's doing better than running in the right direction, right?
He is a lot better than that. And again, I many times every year we get the opportunity to say I was wrong, and I was wrong. And I do think that what this accentuates is just how much value Trent Richardson is robbing from the value from the touches he gets, with the exception of the Cincinnati game when he looked pretty good and then he got hurt and missed a game against the Steelers, and now he's back to Trent Richardson averaging like 3 yards a carry. Gene, just this whole running back 2 picture, as you've been setting your lineups for week 13, anybody standing out as players that you're feeling confident in or feeling less than confident in, or do you have any advice for the Rosetta Stone to decipher New England's backfield?
No.
Anything that stands out looking at the picture of, running back 2 has been rough for everybody this year. Any advice?
Yeah, I think so. I don't have a whole lot of advice there other than, at least in terms of daily fantasy lineups, I've been looking at Trey Mason pretty closely today, both because of how he's playing and the matchup is good there. That would be the only guy that stands out to me, somebody that I've tried to get in those lineups as a cheaper option. Other than that, I think Dan Herron is a guy that we have to consider. But the questions I've been getting have been, do you do Gio? Do you do Jeremy Hill? Which one of those guys? I've been getting that question as much as, can we trust Shane Vereen this week? And I think that's a difficult question to answer, too. You just don't really know which one of those players is going to get going early and which one will get the hot hand. Kind of switched. We saw, Gio Bernard started last week, got the first couple of series, and then we saw Jeremy Hill. But Hill was the guy that kind of played that Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis, salt the game away role, and once he got going, even though, again, he came off the field hobbling a little bit, he was the player that got the bulk of the second half carries. So I think you put those guys in the running back 2 conversation as well. They've got more upside than some of the other players we're talking about because there's a good chance that even one of them could get 15 touches on the ground and some goal line work. But in terms of fitting through the New England mess, I don't know. I didn't really like what I heard yesterday. What I was seeing on Twitter about Blunt and Gray possibly splitting carries. What does that mean for Shane Vereen in a game where you'd kind of expect him to get a little bit more usage? I don't know what to make about the New England situation. As I always say, if you're trying to handicap what's going on in Bill Belichick's brain on either side of the ball, you're just spinning yourself in circles, I think.
And that's why it's going to be fun to see what he does against Aaron Rodgers. I love Belichick. Belichick's one of my favorite guys in the NFL, and this morning, this is the first time that Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady have played ever, and he says, "It is what it is. Whatever hasn't happened, hasn't happened."
Yeah, I think the reason that's going to be interesting is that Bill Belichick likes to take away something that your offense likes to do. But what is that? Is that Eddie Lacy at home running the ball between the tackles against what's been an New England defense? Or is it, try to put some lockdown, put Revis on Nelson and try to lock down Nelson and do some bracket stuff on Cobb, knowing that Devontae Adams isn't fully healthy and they don't have a tight end over the middle? Which one of those things, how is Belichick going to try to make Green Bay beat you? And that's, I think even though it's a really high over-under there this week, if you're looking at what Vegas expects, are those numbers going to go to Eddie Lacy, or are they going to go to the wide receivers? And you can say that on the other side of the ball, too.
Yeah.
Because
except for Gronkowski. Don't you dare say anything bad about Rob Gronkowski.
No, I think, although you... I'm not going to say anything bad about Gronkowski because that's burned me too many times. I traded away Gronkowski in a league that I shouldn't have for Des Bryant and Rashad Jennings and a pretty good package about a month ago, and it pretty much sunk my season in that league because the guy I traded Gronk to pretty much smacked me around with him twice. However, Gronkowski was used to block a fair amount over the past couple of weeks for these running backs, both Gray 2 weeks ago and Blunt last week. Now, it's really not hurt Gronk's numbers, but if you're expecting 12 to 15 targets for Gronkowski this weekend, I don't know that we're going to get that today. So I think, but again, you could say the same thing on the other side of the ball. Do we trust Edelman and LaFell, or do we think this is going to be a running game for Belichick? We may see 60 points, but good luck projecting with confidence who's going to get those points on either side of the ball. Yes, I think you can probably trust Nelson and Lacy on Gronkowski, but the rest of this group, probably Randall Cobb. But if they decide to put Revis on Cobb in the slot, yes,
I agree that
Cobb. You play Cobb. But could this be a week where you see 4 for 40 from Cobb with no touchdowns? Yes.
Yeah. Sure. No, this is going to be very fascinating. And
a really fun game to watch.
Exactly. And it's nice. Arizona Atlanta is the only other game competing for our attention there. No, but you bring up a good point with Adams because we get into, and I think this is where fantasy football is headed. I think this is what daily fantasy is all about. And I think that when we set our lineups, it's the same issue, although they're limited choices. You're not picking from the whole universe of NFL players. But I'll say this. what you just did, Gene, I think is the exercise that all of us are going to have to get better and better at. And really, it should have been the focus of fantasy football during the season anyway, which is putting ourselves in the shoes of coaches and trying to project what. And now, again, the assumption of rational coaching trips us up here. However, we're trying to project how this team is going to deploy what they have, both on offense and defense, against their opponent. And I think I called it earlier this year, like offense by committee, that you have teams that can change their mode week to week if they have coaches that have the wherewithal and the personnel to do it, so that we do end up in these situations where, as you said, 60 points might be scored, but there could be a lot of people playing players from this game and very disappointed. Tim Wright could catch 2 touchdowns again. Andrew Corliss could catch 2 touchdowns. But I'm really glad you brought up Davante Adams, because as I was mentally projecting this game in my head, I felt like, okay, Revis is going to blot out somebody on every play. And as you said, you stated it so perfectly. Belichick is going to try to take away what you are most comfortable doing. And that's why I love it, man. We should try to find some correlation, because when Belichick talks up a player in the week, it's like to bench him. I think it was Calvin Johnson last week. Every time Belichick talks somebody up, that's a bad sign. So that Rodgers, they're going to take away one of those guys from Rodgers on every play, and otherwise scheme to try to take away both of them, and that would lead to Davante Adams. But give us this, because this heel injury, the situation, for folks saying it hasn't been happening for Adams, but man, if you're going to take away Nelson or Cobb, and Lacey's going to get his, but that would point to Davante Adams. But a midweek heel injury, what do we think about this?
I think if I'm remembering correctly, and I'm pretty sure that I am, I think he got stepped on. So it's not like he's got a major soft tissue injury. It's probably just a situation where it was just uncomfortable to continue to practice on. Just looking at the report here really quickly, he was limited again on Friday, but he was probably getting more treatment than anything else. They've got him listed as probable. I don't think there's any indication that he won't play. Could it be something that limited him during the game? But yeah, if he's facing Kyle Arrington, Logan Ryan, those sorts of stuff, if they're trying to bracket coverage on Nelson or Cobb with Revis on the other one, Davante Adams is what he is. I know that there have been some games where he's had 8 or 9 targets, but he's going to. I think you can reliably project him somewhere between 3 and 6 targets. Some of them are going to be really nice targets, but they're going to be 50-50 balls. They're going to be red zone opportunities, and there's just so much to go around in Green Bay. He's a high-risk, high-reward option. I don't think I would consider the heel too much in my calculations for him today. If you're looking at him as a guy where you really, as Matt said, there's going to be some situations this week where you need high upside options in every one of your lineup spots, and Davante Adams is that kind of guy. He's either going to be a 0 to 2 point guy, or he's going to be an 8 to 15 point guy, and there's probably nowhere in between. He's going to score with a long play, or he's going to get a couple of short passes and targets that don't turn into much. I don't think the heel is going to be a big issue.
And I think that for you to say, I think 8 to 15 might be conservative if we're assuming that Aaron Rodgers is locked in and playing well, because in a Peyton Manning kind of way, if that's the choice that often New England is giving him as the optimal choice, it wouldn't surprise me to see him catch 8 or 9 passes today. Then again, like you said, it wouldn't surprise me to see him catch 1 or 2. Matt, we've been talking all kinds of jive and jazz about this New England Green Bay game, and it really is a fascinating one, because whether it's daily fantasy or setting your lineups, because I would be hard-pressed to think of many of my fantasy teams that don't have at least one Patriot or Packer on them. 60, the highest over-under, 58, 59, 60, whatever it was. But at the same time, outside of guys like Nelson, Cobb, Gronk, and Lacey, who you're going to play anyway, what's your feeling about how the fantasy points, however plentiful, with this unknown distribution? Any gut feelings here?
Yeah, I'm still on Blunt. I'm sorry. I think that y'all are completely underplaying this and saying we can't decipher this mystical Bill Belichick. Look at the Green Bay stats and the rushing totals. Marshawn Lynch, big, strong back, where team likes to run the football. 20 carries, 110 yards, 2 touchdowns. Even someone like Matt Asiata, who is like the rental Porta-John version of Marshawn Lynch, is 15 carries for 72, in that week. You have Mark Ingram for 24 carries and 172 yards just a few weeks ago against them. There are a number of teams that have had their 1, 2, 4 teams have had over 20 carries with one of their backs, and they have been big backs who have power. And I understand that Jonas Gray could possibly be that back, but even when they played the Broncos, another high-powered passing attack where, Peyton Manning's going to have a big day. It's against Tom Brady. It's going to be fireworks. You look at that game and you realize that the split between, the split between Vereen and Jonas Gray was equaled about 25 carries. And that was because they didn't know what they had in Jonas Gray. I think that now they know what they got in Gray. They know what they have in Blunt. And I understand why maybe beat reporters or somebody's saying, we don't know how much Vereen's going to get involved in this, which means to me that probably New England's found its rhythm here. I think that New England's found its rhythm saying, we're going to run the ball, and we're going to have that double bind with the tight end and use Gronkowski, and then we can pepper in LaFell, we can pepper in Edelman, whoever's going to be open there. Those are the guys that I'd be like, you're taking your chances with which wide receiver is going to have a decent day. Gronkowski's a given, and then I think it's the Blunt show. I mean, I really do think it's going to be him. At the worst, he's going to get 14 to 15 carries. He's probably going to break off a long one. At that point, 70 yards,
Sure.
A big, so then then you're going to have probably a touchdown or two. I think they trust him more in the red zone than they trust Jonas Gray. So I look at this game and I think they don't want Aaron Rodgers on the field. How do we limit
Exactly.
that? How do we limit that? We're going to run the football, and we're going to have controlled passing, and we're going to give it to guys who we know are going to be able to catch the ball in tight coverage because, LaFell has looked good, but to his credit, but while Green Bay's corners aren't the best, they are feisty, and you put a little feistiness on him, and he kind of wilts like some sort of green vegetable under heat. So I mean, that's kind of the way I look at LaFell a little bit, and I just think that this is the type of game that Rodgers will have a good day, but probably not a great day. And I think that Blunt is probably your guy that if you're going to do Fit Daily, he'd be the guy that if the cost is worth it, that I would probably consider.
See, now you have me going back and going look at Goyd on roids because I think I benched Blunt for, I don't know, Jarvis Landry or somebody. Anyway, no, but I agree with you. What's funny about this one is over-unders, and I fantasy football, especially with the daily fantasy being a bigger part of the picture, has really paid attention to those over-unders as Vegas's forecast of where the high-scoring games are kind of as a tiebreaker. And you lay out the blueprint, Matt, and I actually, in my mind's eye, could see this. It's keeping Aaron Rodgers off the field because he's Aaron Rodgers. It's also keeping Aaron Rodgers off the field because I do think that it could induce him to press a little bit if he's sitting on the bench for 7-8 minute drives and he has to go back in there. And I also see Green Bay being enamored with balance now. 25 carries for Lacy. That was like 7 or 8 more than his high all year. I could actually see this being like a 2017, the 15-round heavyweight title fight where neither fighter tries to make a knockout punch and instead tries to kind of win on the cards at the end and doesn't do anything too risky or too far outside of the range of what they think their offenses are capable of. So this is going to be a fascinating game, to say the least. Let's touch on a couple of other injury situations here. Gene, the Roddy rule. For anybody who doesn't know the Roddy rule, tell them the Roddy rule and tell them why it is very important for them to know that today.
Well, Roddy has told us this year and last year, if he doesn't practice on Friday, Roddy White, yes, Roddy White is the Roddy rule, not Roddy Piper. Wear kilts on the game after Thanksgiving every year. That's the Roddy Piper rule.
We're gonna do Piper's Pit next week. This show is gonna be the Piper's Pit. I'm gonna break a coconut over one of your heads or something.
Well, as torn up as my voice right now is, I could probably do Roddy Piper's Pit, and I could probably do Macho Man Savage without too much trouble. But then I wouldn't be able to talk tomorrow. So
no, we don't want that.
Let's save that for next week.
You got a day off tomorrow, don't you?
No.
Oh, too bad.
Fortunately not. I'm scary enough as it is with this funny-looking face and big ears and beard. I don't need to be scaring the kids anymore with my. I would like it to stay. It's even far away from the Barry White voice it usually is. I can usually make it go Barry White and comfort the children, but not so much. Anyhow, The Roddy rule. Yeah, Roddy White has told us this year and last, if he's not practicing on Friday, then he's not playing. And if, if he's active, he's not necessarily going to be a decoy, but he knows that he's probably not going to be running his usual amount of routes and being effective. And yeah, earlier in the week we were hoping that this was just veteran rest, but as the week went on, we saw that there's something more going on with his ankle injury than we expected. He did not practice on Friday. He was barely doing anything on Friday, and although he says Mike Smith has been telling us that he fully expects White to play, we could see him active, but I don't think there's much chance, given what we've known from Roddy White in the past couple of years, and they were with ankle injuries that this situation has been the case. We've just not seen Roddy White get many routes, take many snaps, run many effective routes, and play effectively. So could you potentially get 4 to 5 catches out of White today? I guess that's possible, but I think there's a better chance of him being inactive today than him being active and effective. So I would be looking for just about any warm body, and we'll talk about this with Larry Fitzgerald as well. But if you've got another viable option other than Roddy White today, I would use him and not wait, especially since it's a late game, and not wait to find out whether he's active and then hope that he's effective.
So, Matt, how should that affect the choice? There's a lot of people I know because I've been getting the questions about it, and I've even been answering it this way, especially with the infusion of rookie wide receivers like Odell Beckham and Mike Evans and so on. It might be the right move for certain people, depending on your roster, to bench Julio Jones. Now, is this one of those situations where you tell those folks, you're overthinking it? Because, hey, if Roddy White's limited or not there, I don't care. Julio Jones is going to get 15 targets. I don't care if it's Arizona. I don't care how many interceptions Matt Ryan's thrown. 9, by the way, the last 2 times he's faced them. Or do you think that that's rational, that even though you drafted Julio Jones as your first-round pick to be your trump card, depending on how you drafted Emmanuel Sanders later on, drafted T.Y. Hilton later on, it is rational to bench Julio today?
Well, let's see. I would say that with Julio Jones, the one thing that we need to understand is that the past couple of weeks that Roddy White has actually played like the Roddy White of old, and he's over the hamstring injury that's bothered him since week 2. He had 6 catches for 59 and 5 for 68 and a touchdown, which is decent, but not first-round pick material that what you're looking for. And then when you look at maybe earlier in the season, again, the offensive line was still a little bit in flux, but you still look at it and you're looking at, 7 catches, 9 catches, 11 catches, 88, 161 yards, 105 yards. I think that with Julio Jones, you have to start him if White's out. I do think that he's going to get enough targets that he can break something. And he is facing a good Arizona defense, but at the same time, you have to understand too that he's that type of big play athlete that can match up with the big play athletes they have on the outside defensively. So I would say that the main thing is you're going to see a steady diet of screen passes, crossing routes, and probably slants on his side of the field, and they'll do some play action to work him on the back side of the field where the team has to focus a little bit more on the run. So I think a lot of Jones's points are going to come early in the first 2 quarters, and he's not going to have a huge day, but I think that he's someone that you can trust more than your average, borderline flex play. And I don't think you'd bench him in that circumstance. I would definitely not start White. I definitely wouldn't even consider him in this case. I would consider Devin Hester if you're looking for a desperation player from the Falcons, because if you're in a deep league and say you can't find anybody else off the waiver wire, I would say Hester's not a bad play only because of his potential as a runner after the catch and the way that they may use him in lieu of White being missing from the lineup. And he's someone that can give you somewhere between 4 to 6 catches and the opportunity to break a play over 20 yards, maybe even 2 or 3 plays over 20 yards. So that's my take, and I'm sticking with it, especially with a blitz-heavy defense. I mean, they don't mind blitz. Todd Bowles does not mind blitzing in situations that would make conservative coaches need to go to the go to the incontinence aisle or something. I don't know. Right. So I mean, this is something where with that leaves a lot of openings in the back end of a secondary, and Hester's not the type of guy that you want running free in the back of a secondary, and I think Atlanta knows that.
I just want to point out that you said incontinence and openings in the back end in the same take there. Gene, Gene, should Julio Jones owners be afraid of Patrick Peterson?
No, no, no. I would, if I were Julio Jones owners, I would want Patrick Peterson playing Julio Jones in press coverage on the line.
And Matt
I'd
Waldman
be more
agrees.
afraid of a bracket coverage with Tyrann Mathieu and anybody else there than anything else, to be honest with you.
Okay, in that same game, Larry Fitzgerald. Give everyone the latest on Larry Fitzgerald because you're looking at John Brown and Michael Floyd on the flip side of this matchup and wondering how Larry Fitzgerald is going to figure into that picture.
Yeah, I like John Brown a lot today. I think, Michael Floyd's probably going to get a few more targets, but I don't know that he's going to get those possession targets that give him a high catch percentage. I think they'll continue to take some shots down the field, especially with, William Moore maybe back for the Falcons today, and we're kind of getting away from the question already. I'm getting off on tangents a lot today. But I think John Brown is a good play today. Michael Floyd may be a little different issue. I'd like to see what Matt and you guys think about that too. But I don't see Fitzgerald playing. Now, the first thing that he told reporters on Friday was that he was highly likely to play. But everything he said after that was not optimistic to me at all. He said, well, it's not really my call. Yes, I could play with a brace. And what did he say specifically? He said, it's not restrictive too much at all. And then he said, it's just a little cumbersome. That doesn't sound like somebody that's really optimistic about playing in a brace. And I think he tried to say he was highly likely to play because we know he's frustrated. We know he wants to play. We know he likes to play through these injuries and sometimes can do so effectively. But I think he realizes that this knee sprain is not ready yet. He wasn't doing any more than just jogging lightly and catching a few passes from what we heard from the guys that saw him in the media portion, that was the portion of practice that was open to media on Friday. I think he's just saying, I really want to play, but I know I'm not there yet. It's out of my hands, so don't blame me when I'm inactive again this week because I'd like to gut it out and try to play, but I really can't. So like Roddy White, there's a chance that he'll be active today, but I don't think he's going to play. And if he is active by some chance, I don't think we're going to see him running routes effectively and getting any more than just a couple of catches.
Way to save that, Gene. You're going to lose your composure there, I could tell. Well done. And I like John Brown too. I have I'm playing John Brown over Roddy White, for instance. And I think that Michael Floyd is your classic boom bust play where Michael Floyd could have 2 for 23 yards, or he could have 5 for 150 and 2 touchdowns. So that's what you have to consider when you're looking at him. We got 10 minutes left here. I'm trying to spend time in proportion to some of the thornier questions of the day. Let's get to some of the other maybe less thorny questions. But going back to the tight end position, Matt, our man RoboCop is not going to play today. So what about Kobe Fleener? Kobe Fleener against Jacksonville is supposed to be wonderful. Our cup runneth over, like 2 catches. So what about this week? Do you dare, if you've been unsatisfied, and we can use Deion Sims as a counterpoint, if you've been unhappy or you're filling in for Allen or Thomas or anybody, do we get back on that horse with Kobe Fleener today?
Yeah, I think that he's someone that's worthwhile doing that with only because he's capable of going off and having a big game for you, and you have to counter that with the likelihood of it depends on how you look at upside. If you want upside, Fleener's your upside guy. If you want safety, then you can feel comfortable on the floor with Deion Sanders. That's basically, or not Deion Sanders, Deion Sims. So I don't know if you'd feel comfortable with Deion Sanders pretty much anywhere, especially not a restaurant in one of his mustard green Italian suits. I waited on him once. He was a joker. But yeah, seriously, you look at this and you have to understand that this is the type of team that the only thing you can say is Telvin Smith's pretty good in coverage, but those safeties aren't. Jonathan Simprian hasn't played extremely well in coverage this year. He's made some big mistakes. I like someone like Fleener to be able to exploit that, and I think that if I'm thinking about that, surely the Indianapolis Colts are thinking about that.
Gene, I want to ask you about the Ravens defense as it relates to Phillip Rivers and Ryan Matthews and Keenan Allen and Malcolm Floyd and Antonio Gates today. The Ravens have been quietly coming on, and at times at home they are a nightmarish defense to face. San Diego's coming east. That sometimes can be a recipe for disaster. But we've also seen the Ravens, I mean, they did give up a lot of yards and touchdowns through the air last week to the Saints. They had that 6 touchdown game they gave up to Roethlisberger a few weeks ago. what's your general outlook, from cold to lukewarm to hot of the San Diego offense in general today against that Ravens defense?
I think it's fairly lukewarm. The issue with the Ravens defense right now is they still don't have any corners that are viable. They pretty much turned over their entire roster outside of Lardarius Webb a couple of weeks ago, and they've played okay. But a lot of that has to do with how that front seven goes and whether or not they can put pressure on the quarterback. So is this going to be a short passing game, or are we going to see some of those short passing plays to Keenan Allen primarily, and maybe try to get Ryan Matthews and Antonio Gates a little bit more involved in the passing game? I think that's probably part of the game plan, but they'll take some shots to Malcolm Floyd downfield, and if they hit those shots, if they can protect Phillip Rivers long enough to allow him to be accurate downfield, then I think this game script could change a little bit. But I think the San Diego offense will have as much to do with how the Baltimore offense does as what it does themselves. If the Baltimore offense can move the ball, get a little bit of a lead, allow that defense to kind of pin its ears back and get after Phillip Rivers a little bit, then I think we're going to see the Chargers struggle overall, especially with them coming cross country against a Baltimore team that's playing fairly well. But if San Diego keeps this game close and they can keep their playbook as open as possible, we may see Phillip Rivers do a little bit better. I don't think this is a good situation for Ryan Matthews at all with the way they're playing the run there right now. Haloti Ngata has been healthy. C.J. Mosley continues to play well. Darrell Smith has been okay. And Will Hill has been a little bit better against the run than what we'd seen from Matt Elam when Elam was playing strong safety. So I don't really like this spot for Matthews unless you're in a PPR league. And I think it's a boom-bust situation for the Chargers offense. I think we could see Allen get a lot of catches, Gates get a lot of catches, but there may not be that many yards involved. And there's going to be some 50-50 balls to Floyd. If he hits them, great. If not, it could be a long day for San Diego.
Matt, this is such a weird question. I can't believe. I mean, this a year ago, this would have seemed like a strange question to ask.
That's why you're asking me.
Yeah. Does Colt McCoy being installed as the starter in Washington make you maybe go back to a Deshaun Jackson or Pierre Garçon, or does it make you feel better about the Washington offense?
Not really, but it only because it's still a crapshoot. But I would actually feel a little better about Andre Roberts because McCoy seems to like to focus on him a little bit more. So if you're really looking for someone and you're desperate, digging down for the barrel for Roddy White replacements, maybe that. But I think that the one thing that you do like about McCoy's a savvy player. He makes some mistakes here and there, but there is some savvy to his game, and I do think that you could see him knocking the rust off in that Cowboys matchup. I would say that if there's any player that I would take the shot on and have a renewed sense of faith, it would be Deshaun Jackson, only because it's clear that Jackson has played really good football this year, and you saw that if you have any chance to read a report on RG3's production this year, read Chris Cooley's breakdown of RG3 that came out this week, and I believe it's in the Washington Post. I'm not sure. Yep. Gene's nodding his head, so he knows. Yeah,
that was really well done.
It was really well done, and one of the things that it highlighted was how wide open Deshaun Jackson was on like a gimme route. This is as fundamental as anything that you would do as a quarterback. And RG3 is so mentally tied up in knots right now after he basically had his brains beaten in over the past 2 years by the Shanna Clue, is that I would just look at that and basically say, McCoy to Jackson probably pretty good, even if McCoy doesn't have the great arm.
Ian, what kind of guidance can we give, or can we even give any guidance to somebody looking at Robert Woods or Sammy Watkins and trying to decide how to avoid Joe Hayden or otherwise factor Joe Hayden into those Buffalo wideout matchups today?
Yeah, I think the expectation is that we'll see Hayden on Watkins primarily. Now, the Browns under Mike Pettin have been moving Hayden around a little bit more than what we've seen in the past, so he's not sticking to one side, and we've seen Pettin kind of move him over onto the primary offensive target threat in the past. So I think there's good reason to expect Hayden on Watkins today. I think Watkins is the type of player that can give Hayden some trouble, though, so I wouldn't necessarily shy away from him. I think you have to lower your expectations for Watkins today. He's really not a good option in daily leagues. But I think, if you're looking at him as a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, and you don't have any clearly better options in season-long leagues, he's fine to use. I don't know what to think about Robert Woods and everybody else there in the Buffalo offense. Some of that has to do with Kyle Orton. Some of that has to do with the wide receivers themselves. Again, it becomes a matter of, can these guys protect Kyle Orton? Can the offensive line protect Kyle Orton? How's the running game going to work? But with respect to Watkins, I think I would trust him in season-long leagues today, knowing that his expectations are a little bit low, but he's likely going to get some shots downfield, and he's going to be a primary red zone option.
Matt, up in Minnesota today, does Cam Newton reveal that he's still Superman?
No, I think this is going to be a running game day in the fog against a Minnesota defense that isn't all that great, and a Vikings offense that can't protect the passer, that even is going to make this makeshift defensive line for Carolina look pretty darn good. They are going to blitz Teddy Bridgewater early, often, and always throughout this game. I mean, there's going to be a lot of pressure coming up the middle, and I think that's going to play well for Newton, who's going to get healthy. He's going to have a pretty easy day. In fantasy and football, relative to football, it's going to be like he's having a Sunday afternoon golf outing compared to like what he's usually been dealing with. And I think that's going to be because Minnesota's going to be one of those rare teams where they're going to be able to run the ball. So if you have Jonathan Stewart or DeAngelo Williams, even the Carolina Panthers might not be able to screw this one up. and these guys might be able to go off and give you 10 to 15 points apiece. Because one of them getting into the red zone, the other one getting enough carries and receptions. I'd probably count more on Stewart, even though it seems like DeAngelo Williams is the starter still. I still like Stewart a little bit more in these situations. And again, Minnesota in the fog, Cam Newton. I mean, Cam Newton in the fog with a guy who doesn't finish his routes. I don't know. Unless we can get a miner's cap on for Kelvin Benjamin, we might lose him there.
Who's that
so,
big, the one like the crossing guard vest, like the shiny
big yellow reflective vest.
Yellow vest. Yeah.
Yeah, if I were Cam Newton, I would pay the fine, whatever fine there would be allowed, to have him wear that over his chest so that I know where to find him in this fog today. But seriously, I mean, Benjamin's an okay play, and it's not that bad. But looking at this, I just don't see high upside. I don't see a high-scoring game, even though Bridgewater showed fairly well against the Packers last week. I also do think, though, that Carolina is going to be able to apply some pressure. They're going to be able to run the ball, and it's going to be a situation where, Bridgewater is worth a desperation start if you're in a really, really deep league, but that's about it. And to me, that it's going to be an easier day for the Panthers.
Gene, this is kind of a bonus question. Like, it doesn't take any points off of your grade on your test if you can't answer it. But I'm just curious what your thoughts are here, because we can go back to Week 13 last year when Denver played Kansas City, and I believe it was a night game. And I think that Eric Decker had one catch the week before, and Eric Decker was facing up with Marcus Cooper, who is going to be stuck on the field today because of Eric Berry's situation. Eric Decker had, I think, 8 for 174 and 4 touchdowns. For somebody trying to catch that shooting star again of Peyton Manning picking on Marcus Cooper, what's our best guess?
On who covers who? I don't know. I think either side of the Kansas City cornerback situation is probably going to be fairly easy for Manning to feast on. And I think Thomas and Sanders are likely to get, Sanders gets a little bit more plays down the sideline. Thomas gets a little bit more plays down the middle of the field. But I think those guys are used in similar ways. And with Thomas out, the question you have to ask yourself is, how effective do you think C.J. Anderson can be between the tackles? And I think that answer is probably pretty effective. But I think you can see Denver putting up 40 points without too much trouble. So I wouldn't lean toward Thomas or Sanders one versus the other simply because of Marcus Cooper. I think both of those players are going to have good nights, good days today, and I wouldn't expect otherwise. So both of those guys should be fine. Do I get half credit for that?
Half credit. No. I mean, you took a shot at the answer, so we're going to give you at least some credit.
I don't know which side Marcus Cooper is going to play on, but I don't really think it matters.
I like that, and then that is that we will. The good judges say we will accept that. Last quick hitters on a few news things before we leave. As we just go a couple minutes over our 1 hour time frame. We see Marshawn Lynch potentially retiring, and Marshawn Lynch is a guy that there's not anything that I could hear that would make you say no way. It's Marshawn Lynch, and especially retirement. So Matt, you're tuned in here. So if somebody, are we still as excited about Kristen Michael in the future, or are we overlooking Robert Turbin with an eye towards the future and picturing Seattle's offense without Lynch next year? It feels like a year ago we just said, Kristen Michael, and that we've had some ups and downs with both of these guys. Turbin, showing what he can do on Thanksgiving. What are your thoughts on the future of the Seattle backfield?
I think it's a committee. I think that's what it's going to be until one maybe just proves beyond a shadow of a doubt, because this is all about competition. That's how they look at it. And every week, if they think one player, you look at their punt return position, and it's like a different guy every week. It's because who performs in practice well, and they put him in the lineup. You see that with wide receivers oftentimes. Some of their wide receivers get a little bit more play than what you noticed before. So it's the same thing with tight end. We saw Cooper Helflet kind of get in there and start to see more opportunities when it was really the Wilson show at that one point. Now we've got our man Moki in there, who's actually getting some opportunities as well. So I look at this, and certainly Kristen Michael has the talent, but he hasn't proven enough. He flashes some big runs, but is he consistent in the passing game? Is he consistent on short yardage? Is he making the plays that they want him to make? So I think that at least next year it's going to be a split, and you still can't count out, just because it looks this way right now, you still cannot count out the idea that this offense is eventually going to revolve around the passing game. I know it seems completely foreign to most people who do not watch the Seahawks on a regular basis, or even do and see now and say, now is the future. Well, the future could very well be that this defense cannot pay the contracts to this defense, and this defense gets broken up, and they're going to need to be able to throw the ball to survive. This year, early on in the season, you have to remember a lot of their offensive line, even now, is hurt. So they're playing with a makeshift offensive line, just like the Falcons are playing with a makeshift offensive line, and their game has been curtailed in a number of different ways. They can't go deep. That's why Julio Jones isn't nearly as effective, because Julio Jones is not a technician. He is just an athlete who plays very well, and athletes can play very well in the NFL, but he's not someone that's going to run all the routes that Roddy White does. That's why White does better when healthy, when a team has no time to protect the passer. This team doesn't have any technicians at wide receiver at that level, and they have a good running game, so they're going to maximize that. But when that offensive line gets healthy, and if it can stay healthy, they know that they need that offensive line to stay healthy, because in the next 3 to 5 years, they're going to need to build that team around Russell Wilson and his passing skills. And if you're discounting his passing skills and you're discounting the receivers, then you're not looking ahead and projecting to the future properly. And I know it sounds crazy to most people, but again, usually those crazy things in the future that turn out to be a reality that everyone goes, wow, we didn't see that coming. Well, you could. You just need to think about it a little bit more, not think about the present.
Things change. Things changing, Gene, in New Orleans, is we're seeing something this morning that Sean Payton and Rob Ryan strongly dislike each other. Change is inevitable. What happened to New Orleans defense, in your opinion, and how excited? So, by the way, guys, I am not wearing I'm a Sadies, if you're ever in Albuquerque, New Mexico, Delicioso. I put the Steelers shirt on Miles, so I'm kind of in between blooming the Steelers today. What happened to the Saints defense, and how excited should it make us to play anybody from the Steelers offense today?
Well, I think a couple of things probably happened, and it's mostly pass defense related. The Saints get ahead quickly, and they put some pressure on their pass defense because teams are going to throw against them. They've had some injuries. The inside linebackers don't run very well. The outside linebackers aren't putting a lot of pressure on the quarterback. Junior Gillette has had a decent year. Cam Jordan's okay, but they've been a little bit more inconsistent than we've seen from them in the past. Keenan Lewis has been banged up. They've had some other cornerback injuries, and Kenny Vaccaro has not been the same player. So all of those things taken together make that defense a little bit less of a big play defense, a little bit easier to convert third down against, and it keeps the games closer. And without, and although Mark Ingram has stepped forward and continued to play well, and Brandon Cooks has done okay, Marcus Colston and Kenny Stills and Brandon Cooks are, in general, especially with Jimmy Graham being dinged up, that passing offense hasn't been such a quick strike deal either, so they're not extending drives down the field. and that puts even more pressure on the defense. So there's been more snaps for the defense in a situation where the players themselves haven't been that good. There may be some disagreements on exactly how aggressive Rob Ryan should be, one direction or the other, from Gary Payton, but I think it has to do with personnel on both sides of the ball more than anything else.
We should have them on Piper's Pit.
Yeah, I'm all for reenacting Piper's Pit, guys. I will get the kill, and we can have Gene play Piper, and I'll be Ricky Steamboat, and Matt, you can be Superfly Snuka. We got to be good guys going into the Piper's Pit. We got to create some tension here.
I'd rather be Bruiser Brody.
All right.
Been in Piper's Pit.
Actually, if I had my choice, it would be Junkyard Dog. I would probably pick or Coco Beware because I would bring my.
That's where I was going with those. Who's going to be JYD and who's going to be Coco Beware? That's what we really need to.
Yeah, you got to have the parrot, man. I mean, I want to have my familiar with me. Now, lots of tension for football, for fantasy football. So much on the line for our fantasy football leagues, and now we're in the 5-week sprint in the NFL. This is what we love. So matchups all over the NFL between two winning teams, New England, Green Bay, and Cleveland, Buffalo, and playoff implication matchups. I mean, San Diego, Buffalo, and even though they're not winning teams, Pittsburgh and New Orleans, playoff implications on both sides there. Atlanta and Arizona, playoff implications on both sides there. Good stuff everywhere around the league, folks. This is what we live for, the 5-week sprint, and very always pleased to have the time and expertise of Matt and Gene on Sunday morning, and we'll be with you. We'll be on Twitter again. Gene's updating his game day injury expectations document right up until game time as we learn more, and we'll be back with you guys. 8 episodes of the Audible during the season. Thursday night hangout back as the holidays are over for now, and otherwise I hope that folks can sit back and enjoy the game. Set your lineups and just relax and enjoy. Let the football wash over us. It's going to be fantastic, everybody. And as always, we ask you to stay classy.